Our next speaker is one of the best SEOs I know. Nick wears many hats at WhiteSpark, including SEO for our clients, designer of our software, developer of our website, and general WhiteSpark product and service strategist. He's mega smart with a keen attention to detail. He's been helping businesses rank in Google since 2008, and today he's going to show you his process for doing a really quick but thorough audit to identify SEO problems and opportunities. You're going to get a really useful audit checklist that you can use, and he's going to cover the top priorities that you should be focusing on to optimize your website. If you have any questions, you can tweet at him. His Twitter handle is @NickPierno, and of course, use the hashtag WLSS, and Nick will get back to you. Hello, Nick. Great to have you with us. How are you doing?
Hello, I'm doing good. Thank you for having me.
Good. I'm excited to see your audit checklist and process.
I'm excited to show you.
All right. So just go ahead, share your screen.
All right. Share.
Oh, look. There's Leon.
That's Leon eating a play mat thing. All right. Oh.
Back.
Yeah.
There we go.
Okay. Start in the middle. Whatever. I use the checklist a lot of the time.
Yeah. There you go.
So, as Darren mentioned, I'm Nick. I work at WhiteSpark as Director of Custom Projects. It's a formal way of saying my role is pretty dynamic, as Darren alluded to. But as it concerns this talk, I've been doing local SEO for SMBs and some larger Bs since about 2008. Okay, so today I'm going to give you a really handy local SEO audit checklist that I use for quickly evaluating the local ranking viability of a business. I was actually just finishing this slide deck up when I saw this tweet claiming that automation has now fully replaced SEO auditing, so bad timing for me, I guess. Apparently you can just hit up actualquickseoanswers.com instead of sitting through this whole thing. I think I'll wait until the AI matures a bit more, personally. There actually are some good SEO scan tools out there that I do usually run sites through during my audit process. That's to catch anything I miss or just get a kind of programmatic look at things. I think SEOptimer, I don't know how you say it, and WooRank are both really good options for free automated scans. I'd say these work better in tandem with a manual audit than as like a replacement for one. So I think it's safe to keep watching. Just as a bit of background on this audit process, you can obviously spend a dozen hours or longer auditing every little detail of a website. And I think I'm sure there are even businesses out there doing that do fantastic work. On the other hand, someone with some SEO experience can get a pretty good read on things just putzing around a site for 10 minutes. So I think it sort of sits in between there. This provides some formality and structure to the process without becoming a huge, expensive project unto itself. The audit scope is actually really flexible too. You can painstakingly dig into every item on the list and roll it up to a formal document, maybe spend 5 hours on it or whatever you make of it, or you can rip through it, taking a quick glance at each area, mark the check boxes, and end up with a pretty good summary, maybe for internal use or something. It takes you 30 minutes. So who's this audit for? I think it's kind of for everyone. SEOs might use this when they're kicking off a project, making an action plan. Developers might use it before launching a site to make sure that it's SEO ready. Agencies or marketers might use it to evaluate prospects during their sales process. Website or business owners who've had some SEO or development work done, maybe they want to use it to check things over or just get a general sense of where they're at. I personally use it pretty much any time I need to get a read on a local business's SEO setup. I'll spend a few hours on it when I have a client who wants it packaged up as a deliverable, or I'll do like a 30-minute version when a friend or family member asks me to take a look at their site, which happens kind of often. So I think you can use it in pretty much any scenario. So this process essentially revolves around a checklist, and the full version includes things like GMB, citations, reviews, and that's in addition to about 30 website-specific areas that it covers. You can grab the full checklist and an example copy with some bits filled in, and a list of tools that'll help you through the process at bit.ly/local SEO audit template. It's a pretty good bit.ly URL, I think. You use it by just running down the list of areas to check, and each area has a priority, and feel free to tweak those priorities if you don't agree with mine. And then there's a status dropdown with 3 choices: all good, heads up, or danger. Those are pretty self-explanatory. And then there's a notes column to jot down what you noticed. Now, we don't have time to cover every item on the checklist today. We don't even have time to cover all the website items. So we'll actually just go over a few of the most important areas together. And I've also grouped some similar areas into a single area. The areas we're going to focus on today are current rankings, HTTPS and URL variants, mobile friendliness, indexation, title tags, content, and backlinks. And I actually think you could even theoretically just use this handful of items to give a website a decent, quick once-over, and that would basically amount to the experienced SEO doing a 10-minute audit on a site just by putzing around like I described earlier. I've randomly selected a website from a plumber in Austin, Texas to use for some examples. For whatever reason, I always use plumbers for my SEO examples. I have no connection to this company. You'll see them on a few slides, but this isn't like a live demo. We're not going to thoroughly audit their site today, just to be clear. I have, however, completed a copy of the checklist for this site as a point of reference for you when you go back to use the template. And that's the same in the same folder I linked to a few slides back. So let's get started after I have a drink of water. An obvious first step is to quickly check the site's current search presence. Why? Well, it'll give you a general sense of where the site's at. If they're ranking number 1, you might not find a lot to comment on. If they're nowhere to be found, maybe you'll find some simple little things that'll make some huge difference. How do we do this? Pretty straightforward, but we'll search their flagship or most important phrases on Google. I don't know if anyone else says flagship, but I like it. You'll want to do this from an incognito or private browsing session just to prevent your search history and whatnot from affecting the results. And I'll start by looking at the homepage title tag. If anyone's even remotely attempted to optimize the site, there will be some target terms in there. If the target terms seem dumb, that's okay. We're more interested right now in seeing if they rank for what they're targeting. Here I've pulled out plumbing company from their homepage title, and I added the geo modifier Austin TX to make sure I'm searching their region, not mine. If they're not ranking for those flagship terms, you can also try searching for a longer string from the title tag. Like here I've got plumbing company, pipe, plumbing services, Austin TX, which is their exact homepage title without the company name. And this will help you determine if they can rank for longer, more specific search, even though they weren't ranking on the shorter, more competitive terms because they're outmatched by their competition or whatever. You might also search for phrases you think they should be targeting or ranking on. I searched plumbing Austin TX, probably the most competitive term in their space, and they were on page 5. So here's a tip, and these orangey yellow slides mean tips. To speed things up, you can use Control F or Command F on the search results page to quickly see if they're there. Use something unique that would be in the snippet, like the domain or the company name. You can also adjust the search settings on Google to return 100 results instead of the usual 10-ish. And a browser extension like Ahrefs SEO toolbar to number the results for you, so you don't have to like count to 80 or something like that. I don't usually bother with this, but it helps speed things up if you're doing several searches. I should also mention there are all sorts of rank tracking tools out there. Shout out to Whitespark's local rank tracker. But I think for this quick and dirty check, that the manual search kind of does the trick. Whatever you're searching for, you're really just looking to get a sense of whether they're killing it or not killing it at all, or maybe there's just something holding them back. When I search plumbing company Austin TX, ATX is ranking at the top of the local pack for my search. They're on page 2 of the organic results. To me, this indicates that the site is viable, doesn't have any big deal breaker impediments, and maybe some content improvements or link building are all it really needs. It's also worth searching for the company name. Sometimes you'll need to throw in a geo modifier like the city if it's not a super unique name. And you just want to see if they have a knowledge panel, they own the top ranking spot. Maybe you want to see if their citations or their other profiles occupy the rest of the page. Ideally, they'll kind of own as much of this page as possible. Already getting dry. That's good. As I mentioned before, ATX had a top local pack ranking. And they were on the page 2 for a decent phrase. The knowledge panel, the branded SERP, they have the knowledge panel. The branded SERP looks pretty good. So there are no major problems with the site showing up, but there's also a lot of room to improve in the rankings department. So I mark this as a heads up, and we'll press on to see how they could work towards bettering their rankings. Now, if you couldn't find any rankings at all for a website, and even if you can, you probably still want to check this, and see how well Google is indexing their domain, if it is or it isn't, or if they're missing pages. Why? Well, because being in Google's index is kind of the whole point of this. Do a Google search for site:yourdomain.com. In this case, atxplumbingcompany.com. And this will just show you all the pages Google has indexed for that domain. And you just want to make sure that all the important pages are there. If they're not, and you're not overtly blocking anything, I'm sorry, if the pages are there, then you're obviously not, like, you don't have anything overtly blocking anything. If they aren't there, check the site's robots.txt at yourdomain.com/robots.txt. If there isn't a robots file at all, then it's obviously not the culprit, though it's probably a good idea to create one, and most CMSs generate one anyway. So unless you've got a hand-coded site or whatever, there probably is one. Looking at the file, you just want to see if any important pages are disallowed, or maybe the whole site. That happens fairly often with WordPress. Not really WordPress's fault. It's actually a nice feature they have to easily hide a site while it's being developed. But sometimes it gets forgotten and the site gets launched, and then the entire site gets ignored by Google until someone figures it out. You can actually prevent this by unchecking discourage search engines under the reading settings in the WordPress dashboard, just as a side note. You can also check the HTML head section of your source code for a no index tag, which acts in pretty much the same way, just on a per page basis. These two indexing blockers are the most common offenders. But if nothing is blocking search engines from a page and it's still not showing up, you can try requesting indexing through Search Console. You can just Google how to do that. Or you may need a deeper technical dive, might need to hire a professional or do some more research into it. ATX's pages are all present in Google's index, so there's nothing for them to report here. I'll give them an all good. Next, it's worth checking to see if they're using a secure connection over HTTPS, and it's also worth checking their common URL variants. Why worry about HTTPS? Well, Google formally recommends it. It's generally considered to be a ranking signal, albeit probably a minor one. Probably most importantly, these days, browsers make non-HTTPS sites look kind of sketchy with scary icons and in the address bar and other like warnings, which might make users nervous. It's super easy to check because all the popular browsers let you know right in the address bar. So you'll probably already know after the first time you visit the site, whether it's using HTTPS or not. Another tip for you, in order to use HTTPS, you need an SSL certificate. These used to be expensive and kind of annoying to set up, but you can actually get one for free from an organization called Let's Encrypt. And a lot of popular hosts are offering them now with like very easy setup, just takes a few clicks. That being said, you might want to consult a professional or do some really thorough research before migrating an established HTTP site. It can be a bit of a process and it does come with some risks, so just be careful. Moving along, some sites might use HTTPS, but some of their content is not secure. You can also see this in the address bar, as indicated there. It's usually some image or some resource on the page that's still using HTTP, left over from migration most often. So you can find those. And another tip for you, you can easily troubleshoot that kind of content, insecure content, with your browser's developer tools or with online tools like Why No Padlock, and then you can get those resources fixed up. Lastly, but importantly, and this is a standalone item on the actual checklist, you should check the common URL variants, which I do by manually entering them into my address bar. That's HTTP, HTTPS, www, non-www. You want them all to end up at the same place. And that's not to be confused with them all resolving to a page, because they can all work by showing their own version of a page. You actually want them to all redirect back to a single variant. So if you enter www.atxplumbingcompany.com, it should spit you back out at just atxplumbingcompany.com or vice versa, whatever your version you want to use is. This here is actually ATX's site breaking when I try to use www as a subdomain, which is probably the worst case scenario. They need a redirect for this. So ATX's site doesn't use HTTPS, and the www version doesn't redirect anywhere. So that's fairly bad. I'd consider this a danger item and something they should address ASAP. It's also worth a quick check to see how the site behaves on mobile devices. Why? Because most sites today are indexed by Google mobile first, which means your site is evaluated primarily on what the search engine sees in a mobile viewport. Mobile usage is also massive. Any given local business site is probably getting 50 to 70% of its traffic from mobile users. And ultimately, if the mobile experience of a site is really bad, or it's just like a desktop site you have to struggle to use, then that can really hurt a website's performance. There are a few easy ways to check this. You can plug the site into Google's mobile-friendly test. It'll spit out a simple yes or no answer and give you a few extra details. You can also just resize your browser window to its narrowest width, or you can use your browser's dev tools to essentially do the same thing. It actually just lets you get a little bit narrower, closer to what a phone looks like, or you can just use your phone. If Google says the page is mobile friendly and your visual inspection shows everything is readable and functional, like ATX's site is here, you can give them a passing grade. Now let's talk about title tags. They can be a pretty big factor for any site, but I think the right title tag is basically mission critical for smaller websites trying to get local rankings. They're also one of the easiest things you can do that have a dramatic impact, especially if you back them up with your content. So they have what I'd call a good easiness to impact ratio. And they generally determine how your pages look in the SERPs, when they're shared on social media, instant messaging platforms, etc. I'll typically start with the homepage title tag. First, I want to see if it's optimized at all, if it just has something like home or the company name. If it is optimized to whatever degree, then next I wonder if it's targeting appropriate, good phrases. A few ways to determine this. If you've got some SEO experience or you're familiar with the industry you're looking at, you can probably venture a pretty solid guess using your big brain. For less obvious situations, then say like a plumber homepage, you can use Google Ads Keyword Planner, which is great for brainstorming keyword variations and getting ideas. Also offers the ability to filter by region right down to the city level. I'm not sure if any other tool offers that. Don't quote me on that. I don't think they do. And that's really handy because you can get like regional, city specific keyword volumes. It's geared towards Google Ads though. So keywords it gives you may tend to have like a transactional bias. I think that's actually a good thing for local search most of the time, but it's worth keeping in mind. You also need a Google Ads account to use it. I do take search volume and competition numbers that it gives you with a grain of salt. I'd say they tend to be most meaningful relative to each other. Like if one has 2,000 searches per month and the other has 500, it's very clear that the former is more frequently searched. But I wouldn't take it to the bank that like it will actually get searched 2,000 times next month. So just keep that in mind. There's also Moz's Keyword Explorer and certainly dozens of other really good tools. A different angle is using your site's existing data, like in Search Console's queries report, which tells you where you currently show up and how often you get clicked and your impressions. There are several useful ways to use this data for keyword research. And it's worth a Google if you're not familiar with it. There's also Google Analytics landing pages report, which you can segment to show organic traffic only. This doesn't really help you find new phrases, but it can help you understand what concepts and areas are performing best in search. And you can also use it to find out where there might be some low-hanging fruit. Like if you've got a page that's getting a decent amount of organic traffic, but it's lacking in the optimization department, and it's got like one paragraph of text on it or something, you could throw some effort at it and potentially jump up a few ranking spots or a lot of ranking spots just by giving it a little nudge. Tip, the highest volume keywords aren't always the best targets, even for a homepage or service page. Sometimes you can get better results by finding lower volume, lower competition phrases because you can actually start getting traffic on them. These aren't necessarily long tail phrases, just maybe not the highest volume among your potential flagship targets. To measure the competition, you can quickly audit a few sites in the search results for a given phrase and get an idea of how hard they'll be to beat. There are much more sophisticated ways to do this, but that's a whole nother presentation. Some of those keyword tools also provide competition metrics for keywords. I don't usually find them super accurate, so I don't really base like significant decisions on them, but your mileage may vary with them. Another thing to look for is like super long or spammy seeming title tags. even though long titles aren't necessarily harmful and there are actually strategic uses for them, they can be a sign that someone is being spammy or inexperienced, or maybe they're getting auto-generated by the CMS or whatever, just something to keep an eye on. Another tip, I personally like to make title tags stand out a little by being more friendly, unique, descriptive, compared to all the other blue links in the SERP. You still want to target your keywords, obviously. You can add in a bit of warmth and charm to your snippets. I think this approach can lead to better click-through rates and just generally better brand experience. So a loose example here would be plumber, pipe, plumbing company, pipe, plumbing companies, LA, as compared to experienced and careful plumbers in Los Angeles. I don't know, maybe you think your customers care about you being careful in their home or whatever. That comes across to me as more warm and inviting, and it kind of just breaks the trend. You'll see like 9 other snippets in the SERPs that are more like the one on the left there, and the one on the right kind of stands out. So obviously this isn't an exhaustive guide to optimizing your titles. For more info, you can check out Ahrefs Guide to SEO Title Tags. I think it's really good. And you also can't go wrong with anything from Backlinko, Moz, or any other popular SEO sites. I think ATX's home and service page titles could use a bit more love, but there's nothing particularly wrong with them. So I give them an all clear, and I'll just make a note to them like, I don't know, maybe it's worth revisiting these title tags. Content. It is a huge ranking factor. It is also a huge conversion and brand experience factor. Auditing content is a little hard to prescribe, though. I think web content is more of an art than an exact science. So trying to define good content for SEO often devolves into word counts, keyword density, repetition in your headings and copy, and then more recently stuff like latent semantic indexing, using synonyms and different ways of saying things, and so on. I think this all has its place, more or less. Not all of those items have their place, but for me, especially as far as doing a quick audit goes, I think it really just boils down to having a good chunk of decent quality text that directly supports the target concept for a given page. In other words, I think you should make it substantial and relevant. So here's a very rough guide to that. Like I said, you want your content to support the target keywords or concepts for the page it's on. You want it to be detailed and informative, and try to answer all the questions an average user might have about the service or product or whatever the page is talking about. It certainly doesn't hurt to include the phrases and keywords that you're targeting and their synonyms within the content, but you want to avoid cramming anything in just for SEO purposes. Write for the user, write about the topic at hand, and you'll almost always include the right phrases just by default. And the more you write, the more likely you'll hit on those LSI terms and phrases too. It's also nice to try and link to your other pages as well as relevant external pages whenever it makes sense. Internal links are definitely valuable. And I think the external ones can help a page look more useful and natural, among other things. And you can look up Rand Fishkin's 5 reasons you should link out to others for more on that. He has a really good piece on that. Lastly, but absolutely not least, I think a hefty amount of content, assuming it hits the right notes, helps a page rank. I was eye-rolling minimum word counts earlier, but since I don't know any other way to quantify it, I'd say shoot for like 800 words on an important page. That's just a shot in the dark. I just want to shoot for like a nice big chunk of meat for the SEO, the search engine to chew on, basically. You can distribute that between headings, paragraphs, blurbs, lists, and any other kinds of formats to avoid making like huge walls of text. They're just not very user-friendly or pretty, but I've also had some pretty great results with walls of text, so your mileage may vary there too. On that note, here are a few home and service page content ideas that probably won't blow your mind, but I feel like some of them are really underused out in the wild and can really help beef up page content. Service features and attributes. It's a pretty obvious one. Why choose your company? It's also pretty standard. Testimonials, same. Subservice blurbs, something like an image and a heading and a description for your subservices, like leak repair if you're a plumber, and then link over to the subpages if they exist too. Describe your process from first contact to job completion, or however it applies in your case. I think that's really nice for prospects to see, and it's also going to be all relevant LSI friendly stuff. Company history, vision statements, team members, a look at your location. all the things you find on like about us pages that usually don't get any traffic, if it makes sense, you can try to sort of thoughtfully include those on the homepage too. Pricing info is one of the most common search terms for almost every service business. And I'm always amazed at how few sites offer this up. It's probably because pricing can be like a moving target and they don't want to upset people when they get the real price. But even if you just discuss pricing like in a vague ballpark sort of way, it gets the words on the page and it helps give potential customers a rough idea. FAQs, love FAQs. They put common search queries right on the page. They help address common customer concerns, obviously. They pre-qualify leads for you. And the question and answer format lends itself really well to potentially getting you into featured snippets, which are cool. For the bonus round, I really like including dynamic content feeds on the homepage whenever it's possible. This could be your latest blog posts, product inventory, recent jobs you've completed, and so on. As long as the content is semi-regularly updated, it means you have a semi-regularly updated homepage too. A lot of times homepages kind of get neglected and they're just static for a long time. I think that shows Google that the site and its content are actively maintained and cared for, which I think is a good thing. I can't really quantify that, but I do think it's a good thing. So ATX's content is decent. It's well enough written, even if it reads a bit SEO-y for my taste. The homepage falls a bit below that 800 word mark, and the way it's laid out doesn't really give me like an informational vibe. It's all very salesy. There's nothing terribly wrong with it. I just suggest they expand on it. The service pages, I spot checked. They're acceptable too, but definitely not enough material on them. A couple hundred words or so. So I'd tell them as much. It's not killing you, but I'd probably help to put some more effort into the content. Finally, let's talk about links. 5 more minutes. Okay. Why should we look at links? Well, assuming the relevance is established by the title tag and the page content, and assuming there's no other major technical impediment, I'd say backlinks are the single most powerful driver of rankings in the universe. So here's how we can evaluate this. We'll want to crack open some kind of backlink checker tool. Ahrefs is super popular. They have a decent free offering too. Moz Link Explorer, formerly Open Site Explorer, also an industry mainstay and has a free option. Majestic, it's a bit lesser known, but it's also quite good. At least last time I checked, haven't used it in a while. SEMrush does the trick too. And there are about a bajillion others out there, some certainly better than others. But I think most of them should give you a decent way to compare backlink profiles between sites, which is what we're mainly going to do here. The kind of lower quality or lesser known backlink tools might not be as good for like really in-depth backlink research, but when you're just comparing, apples to apples, their numbers tend to serve the purpose pretty well. So let's do that. Depending on where the site I'm auditing is sitting in the rankings, I'll choose a couple sites to compare its backlink profile against. If my target site is on page 2, which it is, then I might take a look at the number 1 ranking site and then the bottom site of the first page, which might be number 10 or 9 or whatever, depending on how it's spitting out results. And that'll basically tell me the threshold for breaking onto the front page and then the threshold for unseating the top spot. Plugging those domains into your backlink tool will give you some sort of summary metric, like page authority and domain authority for Moz, URL rank and domain rank from Ahrefs. And just as a side note, I think the page level metrics usually matter more than the domain metrics for a page's ranking ability. You also might want to compare the number of backlinks and the number of referring domains. A lot of the time, tons of links will come from a single domain because it's in the sidebar or footer or whatever. 5,000 links from the same site is obviously a lot different than links from 5,000 different sites. It's also worth looking at the individual sites that are linking. Those summary metrics try to factor in quality, trust, relevance, volume, et cetera, into their algorithms, but none of them are completely reliable. So it might be worth also taking a look for yourself. What you're asking yourself, are a large portion of these links coming from directories? This happens a lot with local businesses. Do you see a lot of low quality sites or sites that aren't relevant to the target site, or lots of sites that are in a different language? Sometimes these can be signs that the links are from some sort of shady link building that they did in the past, or negative SEO or whatever. So something to make a note of. A few things to keep in mind. Just because a link tool scores one site higher than another doesn't necessarily mean it will rank better. Google just has way more sophisticated algorithms and way more data to work with. And of course, there are other factors than backlinks determining the rankings too. In ATX's case, their competitor, Daniels Austin, outranks another competitor, Radiant Plumbing, on a search for a plumbing company, even though the latter has more links and a higher score. Daniels Austin actually uses the exact phrase, plumbing company, in their homepage copy, and Radiant Plumbing doesn't. So in spite of having maybe a little bit better of a link situation, according to Ahrefs anyway, a page's copy or relevance can still win out. When there's a huge gap, though, the results are usually a lot more predictable, which explains why ATX is quite a ways behind these other two sites in the results. Their backlink metrics are considerably lower. ATX has a very low UR and DR due to only having 28 referring domains, which are all either local directories like Yellow Pages, which is totally fine, or link building junk like austinplumbingcompany.blogspot.com. That stuff's generally pretty harmless, but they need to outweigh it with some quality links in order to get it working in their favor. I'd indicate to them that this is a fairly urgent area for them to work on. It's probably the biggest thing holding them back right now. When I'm done running through the checklist, I'll have a list of heads up and danger items that I'll either communicate to the business owner or whoever the stakeholders in the project are, or in a more formal setting, I'll actually turn these items into a document with a section for each and how to fix it, explanations, and all that jazz. And that's it. Don't forget to grab the template and the example files from bit.ly/local SEO audit template. And I think we'll go back to Darren in a second for any questions he has. For anyone watching this live, I should be waiting on Twitter to ready to answer any questions you have. Thanks for coming to my Whitespark talk. You can get 20% off Whitespark stuff with the promo code WLSS. Join our newsletter for awesome local SEO stuff, and make sure you stop at the gift shop. There probably isn't actually a gift shop, although I wouldn't mind some local summit swag. Darren?
Yeah, we'll have to make that for next year.
Next year, okay.
We don't have any swag this year. All right, thanks, Nick. Oh, man, that was super great because, man, you can go down a huge rabbit hole of technical and SEO audit stuff. I've seen audits that are 70 pages long, right? Totally. So it's so nice to just get like, these are the core things. Focus on these things, and you're going to get 80% of the way there. I wonder what that percentage is. What do you think? What percentage, those things that you covered in here, what percent will that get you to the ranking for a small business like a plumber?
It's an interesting question. I literally, so I want to stress this flexibility element of it because I literally use it to do formal, long form audits for clients and turn it into a document, like I said. And I can literally whip through it in 10 minutes and get a really good sense of of what's preventing this business from ranking. Yeah. And so it really depends on the situation, but the audit checklist, I think it covers 90%, if not more, of the things that would be preventing or helping a website to rank. And of course, the full checklist includes, some offsite stuff like reviews and GMB and stuff like that, which are all obviously also factors. So I think if you look at that whole checklist and you just rip through that ultra quick, you'll probably always find what's working and what's not working. Whether it covers like every possible thing that could be like, it's the amount of detail you go into each item that really makes a difference. So like content, well, I spent 5 slides on content or whatever. There may be more, to probe on content. So it's really a matter of how deep you go into each item rather than like what items are missing from the checklist. I'm probably missing stuff. I don't know. I've been using it for a few years and adding stuff to it and gotten a few other people to weigh in and add their stuff to it. So I wouldn't say it's probably not missing anything. It's probably just a matter of granularity that you take each of those items to.
Yep. Yeah, I think it really covers the main things. And another thing that really comes up for me is like, okay, let's say I'm a small business owner, or I'm a business owner. I'm a lawyer, but I don't manage my website. I've never looked at HTML code before. What would I do in this situation? I'm like, okay, these are all good tips. How could I execute on it? Like, what do you think a person should do?
Well, I think in that case, and I would actually encourage business owners and people kind of starting out in SEO or just who want to have a very, very loose grasp on it, I'd actually encourage them to use that checklist as kind of a starting point for like, what do I need to figure out to look into this? So you'll look at the title tags, and then you're going to have to obviously align on a checklist isn't going to answer all your questions about title tags. But now you're aware that that's like an important thing that you need to go look into, and it's prioritized as such on the checklist. And now you'll go to Moz or Backlinko or whatever and be like, what should title tags look like? And so that it'll kind of get you started on that. No, unfortunately, I don't think any kind of audit process or whatever is really going to fill in all those blanks for you. But I think it, again, kind of going back to the previous question, it kind of covers all the starting points for you. And then, the rest is up to you, and how deep you go with it is totally up to you too. And you could also use it as like a guide for how you farm out those tasks. Like, I need someone to deal with title tags. That would be an SEO person. I need someone to deal with website speed or mobile friendliness. That would be something I'll farm out to my developer or whatever. So it can certainly help the business owner or the beginner or whatever to kind of get started on that road.
Yeah, you can kind of use the checklist, even though not all of it is like, I don't really know what that is. You could go to each item, kind of work through it, especially based off of like reviewing the presentation, and then give that to your developer, like whoever built your website. Be like, it's like a prompt. I got to worry about this. I got to worry about this. I got to worry about this. In the checklist, there are like very, very rudimentary like questions, like does your title tag have this and this? Like that's kind of the depth it goes into. Yep. And then with respect to this presentation and this use case, there is an example checklist in the same folder that you can download, and that'll give you again another like kind of secondary point of reference. Like, okay, Nick saw this, this, and this, and that's why he graded it as this. And but nothing I can do in a half an hour presentation is obviously going to be an exhaustive education on how to do an audit. Sure. And even less so, when I'm just covering like a condensed version from the checklist. But going back to your original question, and I think something I said in the talk is that like, if you just focus on those 7 items or whatever it is, you're pretty close to all the way there. Yeah. As long as you're in a relatively conventional situation, you're using WordPress or something, someone built you the website, they knew what they were doing, whatever. You get to that point, and then you just want to look at that handful of items. And if you made a good effort on those items, you're probably well on your way to ranking. And then you got to rinse and repeat with content and links. Yep. And you got to keep that reviews and all that stuff. You got to keep those things going. But yeah, I think it kind of serves everyone well for wherever they're at. Speaking of rinsing and repeating, one thing that you touched on in your presentation was this concept of dynamic content. And I think it's a huge opportunity for many, many businesses that they're not taking advantage of. And I think because of that, it can be a competitive difference maker because, out of all the plumbers in Austin, there's probably 2 that are actually putting dynamic content on their website. So it's a great differentiator. And I think it's like one of the things people should really think about. So having like, if you have regular content coming into your blog, let's say you're using a service or you're writing the content yourself, then make sure there's a feed of that on the homepage. And then I really love the like recent jobs, like just keeping the thing up to date. Because what ends up happening is most small businesses, they make a website in 2015 and they haven't touched it since. It's just like Google thinks it's dead. Is this business even still alive? Google that you're still alive.
You and every other 25 of your competitors have your website from 2015, and you're just sitting there kind of waiting for it to do something.
Yeah.
And some people get to that stage of blogging, and that's a whole kind of thing unto itself or whatever. Blogging's hard, but listing your recent projects isn't, or even like profiling your staff members or something like that. Like anything you can do that you do in one place. You don't even have to touch your code. You don't even have to touch your homepage. You just, keep adding posts of whatever nature to your site, and you get your developer to set that up for you or whatever. And then the most recent one shows up on your homepage. Even if it's every 3 months, it's totally fine. It's way better than just having a static page for 7 years. There are a lot of those homepage points. I was going through that. And I'm like, I almost want to make a presentation about homepages because I feel like there's these little things that just seem so sort of mundane that people just ignore or don't do or whatever, for whatever reason. They're so easy and they take so little effort to do, and they make such a difference. Like just double up your content and get up, do a post every 6 months about your favorite project or something like that. And you're now heads and shoulders above most of the other sites in terms of your content and your freshness and your activity on your site. So yeah, totally.
Yeah, there's some buzz in the industry about like content freshness being a thing, and also a lot of case studies where people took an existing page that was ranking pretty decent, reworked the content, updated it, added some new bits, republished it, and then boom, it's like you can see it in analytics. It was like it was going like this, and then once they did the update, now it's going like this, right? And so you can actually see that happen. And so I would really encourage everybody to, monthly or at least every 3 months, make some changes to your homepage. That's the page that has the most likelihood of ranking. And your service pages, like add new FAQs or recent projects for those services. You keep those pages up to date. I definitely think you'll reap some rewards from all of that maintenance work.
100%.
All right, Nick, that was awesome. Nice to record with you. And thanks a lot for joining us.
Thanks so much, Darren.
Okay, see ya.